Hi everyone, my name is Susan Lloyd Militix, and this is a second in my series of video interviews with inspiring and amazing music teachers. I just know you will love this interview with Mark Wesling. Mark is one of the most happy, optimistic, joyful people that I know. He is full of faith that everything will work out, and for him, it really has. Mark is a classical guitarist, and he performs frequently in public guitar recitals, for art showings, for weddings, for corporate events, at a wolf sanctuary. Mark has done it all. Mark is a teacher at the Music Academy in Campbelltown, Pennsylvania, and also at his home studio in York, PA, which is in a beautiful, serene setting surrounded by an acre of quiet woods. Mark is a composer. He writes poetry that turns into songs, and he also composes pieces for classical guitar. Mark has released 5 CDs of his original compositions, one of which, Be the Bridge, was met with great acclaim for its message of hope and positivity. Mark is also a successful artist, and he has had several art shows in galleries in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. So as you can see, Mark is someone who has a life fully immersed in the arts. Now consider, at the age of 30, Mark left a highly lucrative and high-powered corporate career to pursue his real love, music and teaching and art. So there's a lot to be learned from this video interview, how one can achieve great goals by taking small steps and working at your craft consistently, how one can learn not just from the people in other fields and from people in your own field, but from those around you. And one can learn that working in art leads to a stronger connection in music. Mark is a true Renaissance man. He reads daily for his own improvement. He loves nature. He loves animals. In fact, he lives with 4 beautiful dogs, all of which are rescue animals. And Mark is also renovating his own home, mostly by himself. So he is a great example of how an independent musician, a music teacher entrepreneur, can lead a very successful, happy, and joyful life, fully immersed in the arts. So I hope you will enjoy this interview and gain as much from Mark's wisdom as I have. And thank you for watching. Hi, Albert. All right, well, thank you for inviting me to your home. It's really going to be fun interview here, and we'll talk about what's going on here. But the first thing I want to ask you is, what do you really love about teaching music, about teaching guitar?
Well, I because it's just a great art form, the music and especially classical guitar and all the branches of guitar. Just working with students who are haven't played an instrument before, just really bringing them all the information about guitar and working with them as they're developing their skills. As you know, once you start playing guitar, it's a lifelong
it's addictive.
pursuit. And you start learning. You start to study guitar, all the different styles of guitars. There's so many different sections of guitar around the world that are so popular. So it's just a great way to introduce somebody to a great art form and something that they can really put their time into and really work on and practice and get results, and also bring somebody out of their shell, I guess, their personality. They can start performing and interacting with other people with their guitar, providing music for people. So.
And this has been pretty much a lifelong passion for you.
Yes, I've been teaching and performing now for full-time for 20 years.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm producing music.
If I recall, you actually came from a very successful business career to create a guitar studio. So what motivated you to do that?
Well, I was in my 20s. I was painting, doing a lot of painting, and I was in my 20s and playing guitar and playing out and playing for some events and teaching a little bit in the evenings. And I just realized that I would enjoy spending 100% of my time teaching and creating music and performing and learning the pieces I wanted to learn and going where I wanted to go with the guitar. was a big fan of Rothko and Picasso, of course, and Pollock, and I wanted to go in some directions in art. I knew I would have to have more time to do that. So I knew that the music and the art together would be a great way to have a life in the arts with music and art at the same time.
And you've certainly done that. You've made an amazing life for yourself. Was that, were you scared to make that step? Were you nervous?
Sure. Because I was working at a company, and I was working at AMP, a corporation in Harrisburg, and I was working at the corporate headquarters as an internal auditor and traveling. I passed my CPA exam. I was I was doing all the working for a Fortune 500 company, traveling around. I was actually, at the time, they had private planes, corporate planes that we flew around. So it was quite a life, and interesting life. And I always liked manufacturing. I come from a family of manufacturing engineers, industrial engineers, and just very interesting. So I have a strong interest in manufacturing and engineering and business and everything. So I enjoyed my time there, but I just wanted to be fully into art and music. So.
Wow, yeah. And I know that took bravery to make that step. Now, I know that you do a lot of performing as a soloist, and you compose music, and you teach, and you do art, and you have this ideal of being a Renaissance man, as it were, and this lifestyle. When you first left business, was your first thought, oh, I'm going to be teaching guitar?
So my first goal was that I would be doing a couple events. I thought, well, if I could do just a couple events and do, a month and do some weddings and get into that and then teach, let's say 40 students was my goal. I thought if I could do that and just make a living, that would be awesome. I could really focus on my art, composing things. And so that was my original goal. And then after a year, I found that I reached that goal. I had about 40 students. I was able to support myself. And then I just, it just grew after that. And then what happens is once you're fully immersed in something you enjoy doing, you find all these other avenues to express yourself. Like I started writing music, and then within a couple of years, I produced my first CD of original music and popular classics, and started bringing the artwork into the design covers of the CDs. Started showing artwork, started having showing artwork at various, through my studio and various other forms. Once I made the leap to being a full-time teacher, full-time musician, the music academy, somebody told me about just like a couple weeks later about it, just opened up in Campbelltown, right outside of Hershey, and it was a great opportunity, and they just happened to need a guitar teacher that was needed, so I started teaching there, and then so these things started opening up, and I ended up meeting all these musicians who were producing CDs and going out and playing, and so it just started growing. And then after I started teaching a number of students, and I actually at one point was up to teaching 90 students guitar lessons, and
wow,
and doing that, and so I started thinking, well, I could do guitar camps, some summer camps for students, and I had the Music Academy had the room, and I started doing that about 15 years ago, and then later on after I started doing CDs, classical guitar CDs, I started thinking, well, I could do some children's music. I could write some music for educational and for school programs. So I started branching into that and meeting other musicians that could help me out there. And I came across a recording engineer who was the husband of a violin teacher who I met, who had a recording studio, and started, had this opportunity to do the recording aspect and creating music. And so a lot of things started to come together, and it's again, once you decide to follow something that you have a strong interest in and passion in, you'll find that you'll start to connect with all these people, and actually they'll actually show up and help you in your journey to do what you want to do.
That's a fantastic story. And I've known you for some years. I've found that you're always a very positive and optimistic person.
Yes. Yes.
And so I wanted to ask you about your approach to problem solving. Now, I remember we had lessons at a music store in New Cumberland.
Yes.
Which very shortly afterwards they announced they were selling to be a bank, and you all of a sudden, I have all these students here, where am I going to go? You didn't panic. You solved that problem in a week. How do you do that? How's that work for you?
Well, and I would think of your brain. Your brain is a computer. So if you give yourself enough time and don't panic, your brain will figure out a solution. It's just like, so I saw that, okay, I'm not going to have this location anymore, but the thing about being a guitar teacher is you can, basically all you need is 2 chairs and a music stand. So I thought there has to be some locations in here that would be more than happy to rent out their space for 1 day a week. And it just happened there was a big church, an old church right across the street. And I just went to the secretary there and I said, can I rent out one of your rooms? And there were probably 20 unused rooms in that church during Monday afternoons and evenings. Probably used a lot more during the weekends, but they were totally open, and they're like, "Oh, sure, we'd love to have that." And I just every month I would count up the lessons and pay them, and they were just happy. It was just worked out perfectly. So yeah, if you just take time to think and not panic, you'll figure out. You just your brain needs time to process all the possibilities, and at the same time draw on all the people that you've met over in your community, the people that you've worked with. I tend to, if you think about something and just take a little time to think it through, you'll usually have a solution.
That's very good advice, which leads me to this question. Do you have a mindfulness practice or intuitive practice or even a visualization practice that you use with your students in your teaching?
Yes, I do. Sometimes I'll before recitals, I'll have my students, as they're practicing pieces, I'll have them imagine that they're on stage performing. I just say, just imagine that you're performing, even if you're not playing the guitar. You could be running home from school on the bus, and just imagine that you're practicing your music. I learned that from some interviews with some of the professional guitarists around the world, that sometimes they practice their music on their plane flights to concerts in their head while they just imagine that they're performing the music. So I also say, also intuitively, a lot of times my students will be reading music and they forget the note, and I would say, and it's usually they put their finger right to it and then they pull off because they're hesitant. And I would say, intuitively, you're going to go to the right note first. So they usually go to the right note, and then they're not sure when they're in that not sure phase of where all the fuzziness of all the notes. So I would say your intuition probably is going to be the best thing. You're going to go to that note first, and just I would say just relax, enjoy the music, listen to the music while you're playing your music. A lot of my adult students, they criticize themselves so much when they're playing that they get nervous and they think, oh gosh, I shouldn't be making these mistakes. I say, no, just listen to the music, enjoy it as a listener, and play the music, and you're going to get better. Well, you're just going to naturally get better. So you can, it's in your mind. You just have to enjoy what you're doing, have patience, and realize it's going to take some time to learn the music and get good at the instrument.
Is that connected to your philosophy you're known for of be the music?
Oh sure, yes. Yeah, be in the present moment and enjoying the music at that time, because you can't worry about performances. As you know, when you're doing weddings and you're getting ready for weddings, if you have, let's say you have 2 events on one Saturday and you start stressing out, you can't be stressing about the next event while you're playing one event or thing. So you have to just and I got that, I actually picked that up from some interviews with Oprah Winfrey, where she talked about how she had 5 shows each day, and she said, if I don't sort of be in the moment, I start thinking of every show. So you just have to be in the moment and realize that time is going to move, and you're going to eventually get this event is going to come to completion, and your next event is going to start, and you're going to travel there, and you're going to do this, and it's going to happen, and you just have to be focused on where you are, and that's Eckhart Tolle's being in the moment too.
So you learn from a lot of other sources.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Always. Everything brings in, as an artist and as a musician and a composer, you're constantly bringing in information from other artists. I spend a lot of time on YouTube listening to interviews, biographies of artists. I love studying the Impressionist movements, interviews with artists, Picasso, Rothko, Pollock, and then just the lives of Beethoven, Mozart, all the and the poets, just bringing it all together, and so you can bring you can't ever not learn from other successful people. If you study what they've done, you always learn something by studying other people's lives. And I study a lot of times my students, what they're doing, because they're often successful in other areas, or their parents have done great things in other areas. So I'm always trying to pick up information and life skills from everybody around me.
Now you sound like you should be featured in Success magazine. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Yeah, I do these daily mentoring sessions with Darren Hardy, who was the original publisher of Success magazine.
Oh, wow.
And he's always talking about learning from other people.
Oh, yes.
And he does a lot of interviews. So I think that's great that you're so observant about artists and poets and musicians and learning what they did and how that works and how that connects with our lives.
Yeah, even as a kid, I used to love to read biographies of Thomas Edison and all the people. So Tesla, all the different inventors and engineers and that. So love reading more about Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and all them too. So
how does your art specifically connect with your music, say in your composition?
Well, that's a very good question. My painting actually gave me the confidence to start composing, because I started painting, and by getting you start out with a blank canvas and you start composing, and from the time you put the first mark on the canvas, I'm usually consumed with that painting, so I'm interested. Just like when I do the first part of a musical composition, the moment I start writing a first line of music, it's just a constant. You're focused on that. It's like even if I go off to go teach, I'm still thinking about that painting or that composition and adding to it over the weeks, or days or hours if it takes less time. But once I started painting and realizing after finishing a painting that I knew it was finished, and I really enjoyed the outcome of it, the process and the outcome, and I realized that this was something that created out of nothing that now means a great deal to me. I realized that that's the same thing with composing music. You can compose, and you have to start out modestly, not think that you're going to write, there's all these images we have of Mozart and Beethoven and all this, so we sometimes won't step up to the plate and try anything. But if you realize you just, with classical guitars, you could write a 1-minute piece of classical guitar that you could be very proud of, and that many people could enjoy it. So, and the same thing, I started with the children's music. Was writing children's songs. My goal was to write that music, and then to get better at writing songs, and then to write more adult music, relationship music, and then my goal after that is opera. I'd like to do opera at some time, and choral music. So symphonies and choral music and opera. So you have to start small and start getting better and getting better at, because even the Beatles, their music, their first songs they wrote when they were in their teens wasn't what they were doing when they were in their 30s. It got much more sophisticated, and you see that with all your popular musicians, that they're learning how to compose. They're learning how to bring more colors, more chords into their composition. And same with painting. You look at any painter. Picasso is a great example. You see how he evolved over his life of his work. So,
do you have any a popular musician that you particularly admire in terms of what they're doing?
I've always looked at Sting as a very good role model because he took some big risks. He was also he was an auditor, and he was working for the Inland Revenue Service of England, and he was a teacher, and he took some very big risks. He could have been he could have just stayed at his school for his whole life, but he made some big risks. He moved to London, just took a lot of risks, and then there's I think Billy Joel is a good example because he's been through a lot of personal battles, and at the same time he keeps coming through and wrote so many great music, great songs, and then he's dedicated to classical music. So he's finally said, he's the same thing. He had to, hone his craft and everything. So now he's writing piano sonatas, and that's his passion now. So
I noticed on your website things are very well integrated, and with your compositions, you have music available for your students to print out. And these are recorded pieces that if a student hears something, what gave you the idea to do that? That's great.
Well, I started using Finale and getting better at that. And as I was writing pieces for the CDs that I was producing the classical guitar CDs, I thought, I'd like to eventually put a book together of original compositions, but I thought I'll put these out because with the internet, and again, when I first left and went into music career, the internet wasn't that popular yet. I mean, it was just starting to be popular. Facebook, all those things weren't available. Websites were just starting and everything. So all these things, as they're changing, you realize that now, I have about probably 1,000 friends on Facebook that are guitarists all around the world, and so I can post a composition on Facebook and have people from the Ukraine to South America to Canada to Europe, all looking at the music instantaneously. So I thought, well, let's start getting the music out. And another aspect of that is I can also edit it. The process of editing it. Like if somebody, you always, as you know, whenever you're doing composing or any CD or anything, you're constantly looking at the music and that, and your mind plays tricks on you and things. So I wanted to put out music and just have it available for people, and also my students, as they get up to a certain level where they can start playing, I wanted different pieces that they could play that are just fun pieces, and so I thought I'll just put it out there first, and all you have to do is you just create the Finale music, you convert it to a PDF and upload it to your website, and so it's just amazing what you could do once you put the music out there. So I knew it would come back in other ways, and I just pretty much say, if you enjoy the music, consider downloading or the CDs, or adding the CDs to your jukebox, your Pandora, your Apple Music, and things like that. And in the end, it'll end up working out. So, and it has. So
I've seen you be on stage with maybe 50 students.
Yes.
And you're in control. How do you do that?
Well, actually, glad you say that, because there's many times when I'm not in control. Many times when and that's probably after saying 200 times behind. Pay attention. This for 20 as with my music camps. So I think on the stage, of course, when there's a group of audience, they're a little shell shocked. A lot of the students, so they're maybe a little less more. But yeah, you just once you give them practice running over the music, and once you realize that this is it, and letting the students know that this is it, this is our time to shine for everybody. All the hard work we've been putting in, then they step to the plate. So they do a good job. I've always that's always the funnest part. I'm always running around at my recitals and in my guitar camp recitals. It just goes by like a blur, and I'm usually just. In fact, I once tried to do 2 recitals back to back, and I was so exhausted the second recital, I almost, I was almost losing it, because it was just so much energy into each recital. So I only do recitals at a time, but it just all comes together, and it's just you're surprised. Like I'm so surprised when I see the great performance that kids do. And one interesting thing is that most of my students, the young kids, they don't actually get nervous on stage. They actually get up on stage, and in most cases, they actually play their music better than I've ever heard them play. It's a weird phenomenon that kids do. Adults do very well too, but sometimes adults give themselves some negative feedback and everything.
Thinking going on.
Yes. But the kids, they tend to get up on stage and usually do the best. So I'm sort of blown away by the performances. So, and then sharing it with the public is great.
I know that you teach students of all different levels,
yes.
from pretty young to adults. What advice would you give to someone, say, for example, working with young children?
I'd say probably start with, don't go the super young students yet. My goal at first was to teach 7, 8-year-old students as young as that.
That's pretty young.
Yeah, and then you have to get, and there's an interesting thing was there's some books that came out right around that time too that were geared towards young kids. So I wasn't having to use the the books that usually used for high school kids or adults. So they came out with this great series of books for guitar called the Progressive Young Beginner Series, right when I started teaching 20 years ago. So I started using that, and there's some Mel Bay little children's books and things started coming out after that too. So those sort of came and that made it a little bit easier because they were really laid out. Instead of learning 3 notes in one lesson, you're learning 1 note in a lesson. But I would say start with a certain age, and then as you get more comfortable teaching, then start moving down to the, and I usually don't go below 5 because it's just a little bit too much. The guitar is just a little bit more of a complicated instrument to do at 3 or 4, so maybe 4 3/4. But just it takes a little time to get good at teaching the young kids before you get down to the younger age, because you have to keep their attention. You have to know when you have to back off. You have to make it fun. You have to give them praise, and and realize that what it means to make a big jump at 5 is much different than 7 or 8. So you have to. Otherwise, you may overwhelm them or make them feel like they're not successful. And the parents will often say, they're not thinking that they're getting progress, but you realize that there really is progress, but it's a much different progress of a 5, 6-year-old as it is to 7, 8-year-olds, and so forth as you get older. So students.
And you probably have a lot of adult students since the guitar is the most popular instrument.
And yes.
What about working with adults?
Well, one thing the adults always say is, "I wish I started when I was younger." That's all they always tell me. So, or I wish I had continued. I took lessons earlier, so
right.
So I always say pass that around to everybody in my studio. But working with adults, you just have to realize, first of all, they want to be able to play the music that they already have a great knowledge of music and what they want to play. So you can't keep them too much on the books, the children's books or the teenager books. You got to get them as quick as possible into Hotel California or things like that. Otherwise, they're just going to. You have to realize they also have very busy lives. So that's why I was saying, my young students, you won't ever have this much free time as you do right now, even though you think you're busy. When you get to be an adult, you don't have nearly as much free time. So this is best time. So adults have a limited amount of free time to learn and practice. So you want to make good use of it, be effective. I usually just go through the 20 notes and in the first position, make sure we know those, start getting into chords, mini chords, then full chords. And if we can get into bar chords in 6 months, that's great. And then now there's another thing is there's also a lot of other services that complement that. Like Ultimate Guitar wasn't around, 20 years ago, but now you can pull up these great, any song, you pull up all these different versions of the chords with the lyrics and have them playing music and improving their musicality right there in the lesson. And it's very easy to do that, and it's so they can get access to the music they want to play a lot faster, and you can help them with the musicality of strumming and how they're going to create music while they're. A lot of people think, oh well, there's all this stuff on the internet, it's going to take away from the teachers, but really the teacher can facilitate how to work with all the information that's out there.
That's a really good point. I recently wrote a blog post, sort of anti-internet lessons,
Sure,
not completely,
sure,
because some people that's all the access they have, but I always felt that when you work with a live teacher, you just grow so much more quickly in so many ways. But guitarists are all over the internet.
Yes,
Fender just started a new lesson program.
Sure.
And there's the good sides, but it just doesn't replace the progress you'll make when you work with a person.
Well, there's always been videos. Remember, for 20 years ago, there were videos on how to play the guitar, and so they've always had those videos. Even when I was a kid, I remember the videos that were on the TV where you could buy the learning series, and then there's the Esteban series. And all that. Yeah, so there's always been that, but I would say, and this is where I draw in from working with other people, is I work at the Music Academy where there's a violin luthier named Bob Kane in the basement. He owns, him and his wife own the whole Music Academy. Well, you wouldn't expect to learn how to make a violin from a video, or an internet series. You want to be there. There's an apprentice. You can, but you're just going to have to make 100 violins before you get a good one.
Or maybe 1,000.
Yeah, maybe 1,000. So as a mentor, as a teacher, you have much more access, and there's an element of coaching too. In being a music teacher, you're giving them the information, the music, the right books to use, and at the same time you're maximizing their time. So I think we're all self-taught, but we just get our information from different sources. You have to teach yourself, and in the end, the musician has to learn the instrument on their own and practice it and everything. But a good teacher can bring all the best materials and music to that person in the order that they needed. So.
And you said we're all still learning.
Yes, exactly.
I remember you mentioning now. Tell me about your study in Italy. You went, or was it Greece?
Yes, like 7 years ago I went to. I heard about a workshop with Antigone Goni and Elena Papadou, two Greek guitarists, very well known, and they were doing a workshop out there with a lot of master students, and I it was a 1 week workshop, and I went there as an auditor, but it was very accessible, and I was able to watch. Them teaching all these up-and-coming concert guitarists in Europe and all over the world. So that was a great learning experience for me. And I always, whenever I can, I'd like to attend master classes when possible. And there's a good concert series of guitarists in Baltimore and Philadelphia. But YouTube again, I'm always watching them. And there was just a great interview with John Williams recently that I watched on. It was like a 3-part interview, and he talked all about. So you just constantly learn from. I used to get, back when Blockbuster, we used to order the videos from Blockbuster, wait to get them, and absorb those. And now, the information.
Now it's instantaneous.
Yes.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yes.
What new projects are you working on?
Well, I'm doing I'm composing more classical guitar music. I'm also working with one of my students doing a recording project with some songs that I've written, some of my adult songs, songs of relationship, about personal lives and inspiration songs that I've written over the years. So I have a backlog of a lot of songs and poems that I've written that could be turned into songs. I write a lot of 5-verse poems that I later can turn into songs. And so I'm starting to do more recording of that. And I have a great number of students that are very good vocalists. I have this one student named Heidi Louise, who's great, has a really plays piano, and she has a very vocal talent. She's a very talented vocalist, and she's been recording some of my songs. I have some other students that I think would be great to record some more songs, and it's sort of my goal is to sort of recreate the Sam Phillips Sun Records, where you produce a lot of music. But now the internet has with the music industry has changed, where people aren't doing as many albums, but you can create a single now, and within a couple of weeks you can have that uploaded to all the different streaming services as a single. The nice thing about being a music teacher and performer is that you have this sort of flexible schedule where you can do projects while you're teaching and while you're performing in between the gigs and everything. So it's just a constant trying to prioritize. But again, as you know, the one most valuable asset is time. Running out of time. You got to prioritize what you want to accomplish, and what you got to sort of realize what you want to accomplish in these different periods. My goal is to be productive through my 80s, and I have different ideas of what I want to do, and I'm 50 years old now, so I have to, I don't have all the time in the world anymore, so I have to have certain projects I want to work on. So
you're right about timing, very valuable.
Yeah.
Yes. I see your beautiful hum for your guitar there. Are you going to be playing something? Is there a song? That would be wonderful. We'd love to capture something.
This is a piece, an expert of a piece called Study 37. So.